Hi everyone, this is Frank DeMora with the Last Chronicles of Planet Earth. Today is October the 3rd, and I want to cover some very important news pertaining to Israel and specifically East Jerusalem, if you will, because in Zechariah 12:3 in the Old Testament, Zechariah the prophet told us in the last days, if you read Zechariah 12:3, that in the last days all the people of the earth were going to be coming against Israel, and all the people of the earth will be coming against the city of Jerusalem. The first sentence within Zechariah 12:3 says this: "And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people." So we know, for example, the Palestinians last week, or 2 weeks ago now, went into the UN to proclaim, or at least to try to get the UN to give them or proclaim as an independent state, to make it the 194th nation in the world. And so most of the problems that have been coming up with the failed peace process over the last 2 years are two major problems. Number one, it's the ownership of East Jerusalem. So we see how Zechariah 12:3 is coming into play there. And the borders of the 1967 borders, of which Israel took land away from the Palestinians in that 1967 war. And part of the 1967 borders would be East Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is tied in together in both of the problems, actually, and they can't get around it. So let me give you some information about Israel in the last days. Supposed to be isolated, they're supposed to be left alone, the whole world coming against them, and we're seeing these things taking place. And all prophecy, since the last prophecies that need to be fulfilled yet, they're going to be centered around the nation Israel. So it becomes very important for us to keep our eyes on Israel and what happens there to Israel. Now, there's an article that came out today by the AP, Associated Press, with the title, Panetta warns Israel against growing isolation. So right there, just the title alone shows you that, Zechariah 12:3 is coming into play, because Israel is becoming isolated throughout the world. And it's because of the failed peace process. It says Israel must find a way to resume negotiations with the Palestinians and has a responsibility to try to ease tensions with its neighbors in the region. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak said Monday, amid prodding from the United States to return to the peace talks. Now, standing next to Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, Barak pushed back a bit on the Pentagon's chief warning that Israel is becoming increasingly isolated in the region, threatening its security. Now, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1, all the way to read verse 1 to 4. And Paul told us that Israel in the last days, when they're calling for peace and safety, sudden destruction will come. So we put both of these scriptures together. Zechariah 12:3, where Israel's isolated, and during the last days they'll be calling for peace and safety. You see that that's exactly what they're doing. It's in the news. Both of these things are major prophecies that will be fulfilled. They're in the process of being fulfilled now. And when they're talking about peace and security, this is exactly what Paul warned about during the last days. So let me continue. And he offered no thoughts on the thorny issues that have stymied the peace talks, including the proposed timetable and the contested settlements in the West Bank and, there you go, East Jerusalem. So what we're seeing in the news is exactly the same thing as warned by Zechariah the prophet and then Paul in the New Testament. It says, making his first trip to Israel as defense secretary, Panetta had pressed the Obama administration's view that the two sides must restart the long-stalled peace talks And during a news conference with Barack, Panetta said that it's time for a bold action by both sides to move forward a negotiated two-state solution. Now, you have the United States, again, if you're new, the United States is working to split or divide Israel. Joel chapter 3, verse 2 says that anybody who divides the land, his land, which would be Israel, modern day Israel, God was going to bring them down and destroy those people. He tells us the same thing in Zechariah 12:3, that he's going to cut anybody that comes against Jerusalem. He's going to cut them into pieces. And so the United States has fallen under the curse, as we see from Genesis 12:3, because they're coming against Israel. It says, the visit comes anew with new international pressure to reach a peace deal by the end of the year. So they're trying to speed up things. And, to them, Barack Obama, it's really important to try to get a peace deal by the end of the year. Now, they've been trying to get a peace deal since 1979. So, pushing this thing forward. Now, the only difference between that from the beginning of the peace process back in 1979, when Jimmy Carter started his peace process with was Anwar Sadat and Mohammed Begin from Israel, is the fact that over the course of these many years, there's been wars in between those peace talks. And this is exactly what Jesus said in Mark 13:8, where he said in the last days there would be birth pangs. These are part of the birth pangs. And these failed peace process talks are part of the birth pangs, which are really getting more intense now as the peace process has fallen apart. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring out in this, when you go to my website, you'll be able to click to this news article, and you'll be able to read the whole article. There's a lot more in there in this article. But let me read one more paragraph, because this is when we're talking about isolation. It says, and while he agreed Israel needs to reach out to its neighbors, he said that it is clear that there are others in the world who would like to see Israel cornered into some kind of isolation. So again, they're talking about Israel being isolated. And the others that he is talking about, it doesn't say who they are, but we know who they are because, for example, Iran, Ahmadinejad, the president from Iran, has been very vocal over the course of these years, saying that he wants to destroy Israel. And he has people and he has influence in Lebanon, in Syria, and it's almost like these nations have become a satellite nation under Ahmadinejad. So the other nations that he's talking about, for example, that would be one of the nations that you talk about. But we do know in the last days, Israel will be isolated. And that's what we're seeing. So if you see those things taking place, it should tell you that something major is coming up. Now I'm going to give you another article that you could read the whole article, but you'll be able to see this pretty well. It says Palestinian UN membership roulette, or membership roulette. And it talks about the number of the nations who are now supporting the PLO state. It says, as the Palestinian legal advisor in 1987, law professor Francis Boyd drafted its Declaration of Independence, creating a Palestinian state. Palestinians now want and deserve official recognition and full de jure UN membership. Washington and Israel remain obstructionist, and during doing so far isolates both countries. Globally, Obama and Netanyahu are laughingstocks, more caricatures than leaders. Their contempt for rule of law, principles, democratic values, and equal justice is palpable. On the progressive radio news show hour that aired on October the 2nd, Boyd said 170 nations support the Palestinian UN membership, according to the Financial Times. If all 193 nations vote, only 129 are needed to admit Palestine as a UN's 194th member, according to Boyd. It's achievable by mid-October if Abbas follows the proper procedures. Nonetheless, diplomatic roulette continues. So the issue of trying to get the Palestinians as a full member, or the 194th nation, is well underway. So we see that most of the nations around the world are already against Israel, and they're trying to divide Israel. So we're coming at a pinnacle point in prophecy, and we do know within the next couple of months we're going to see whether the UN and the nations who are involved in these peace process can actually bring out a independent Palestinian state inside of Israel. Now, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for the fulfillment of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, where Paul shows us that there was going to be destruction, sudden destruction, where they're calling for this peace and safety. So what are the odds, that Israel won't go to war again? I would say the odds against Israel going to war are very, very, very good, because Psalm 83 war shows us that Israel will go to war against their bordering nations, of which you see Egypt is now an enemy. And this is one of the reasons why the Panetta has been trying to say that you need to make peace with the regional nations, and he included Egypt in there. So I stand on the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord tells us that Egypt will attack Israel in the last days in that Psalm 83 war. So when you look at the full scope of what's happening in the news, don't expect anything good to happen for making a Palestinian state, because I believe that war will break out before that ever takes place. So now, with that, there's some other news that I'm going to have to get into a different source here. It says a news source: Israel officially accepts the quartet proposal. So today's news came out and said that now Benjamin Netanyahu has go along and said that he, under no preconditions, that he will go back to the peace negotiation table, and he's hoping that Abbas will do the same thing. But he did say, according to this article, which I'm going to put the link up for you, though Israel has a number of reservations which it will arise during negotiations, it calls on the PA to do the same and enter into direct talks without delay. So what are the reservations that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has? Well, it's the same ones he's had ever since he became Prime Minister. 1967 borders and the ownership of East Jerusalem, of which he said over and over again he will not ever, ever give away the holiest city to the Jewish nation. So you have it in a nutshell. You can see what's coming up. We see the destruction. We see the war that's coming up when the peace process will continue to fail, and Israel will not give the 67 borders away again, and they are not going to give East Jerusalem away to their enemy. And so we just need to keep watching the news and watching what's happening, because this is a really, really important prophecy. And all prophecies, again, is going to be centered around Israel. So that's why I'm paying a lot of attention to what's happening in the Middle East.